go back to 1995. Me and my mate Sol on the bus, not even aware what we were doing. But at the time, I was growing out my hair to have braids, so my hair would grow out quite thick. So I would wear a bandana, right? He, on the same day, chose to wear a bandana. So there's me in my blue bandana, him in his white bandana on a bus going through Enfield Town. We must have looked like a couple
Kid and Play.
dick-offs. I've probably got a photo somewhere. But,
Kid and Play.
No, more like...
I do a house party.
Yeah. Oh, maybe we should do that on the podcast. House party. The third one.
It's classic.
Oh, wow.
Oh, God.
Hello, you are listening to Off Radar, It's a Movie Podcast. I'm James Smith, a professional film and video editor.
I'm James Eatock, a freelance writer and illustrator specialising in 1980s cartoons.
And I'm Neil Brock, aka Nige, the man with two names, former film journalist and currently working in the games industry.
Each week, one of us picks a movie that all three of us either haven't seen in many years or in some cases haven't seen at all.
We each watch the chosen movie, return to the microphone and let you all know exactly what we thought of it.
I'd never really had any interest in watching it and I was proved absolutely right.
I think it's amazing. I really, really love this film.
The film's still a pile of steaming dog shit.
If you fancy joining in and suggesting a movie for us to watch, why not tweet us at Off Radar Podcast
or email us on offradarpod@gmail.com.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, share, and by all means, leave a review.
For now, strap in, turn the volume up, and let's go Off Radar. I just need a really quick wee-wee, then we'll crack on.
I need to do a wee-wee here.
I did my wee-wee.
Hello, and welcome back to the podcast, Off Radar. It's still a movie podcast. I am James
Was it going to be
Smith.
changed? I wasn't aware of that.
No.
Well, it was changed because it used to be like, let's interview people with James Smith, and then we got involved.
Yeah, now you've messed it all up and made it into a film podcast.
And now Off Radar doesn't even really make any sense because a lot of these films are on Radar. So
yeah, well, maybe we should rebrand On Radar. Welcome
we've got this
to
huge
On
following.
Radar.
Or Off Rara. Sorry.
So I am James Smith and I am joined by James Eatock.
Hello.
Who was blowing his ding dong.
my nose.
And Neil Brock.
Oh, hello there. Now, I was supposed to be doing like a Milwaukee accent, and that was Irish. So let's just.
We're top of the morning to you. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Jeeze.
Yeah, we're actually reviewing Leprechaun 3 today.
Yeah. You have to be Pat a gold eye.
And for the sake of the podcast, we call Neil Nige, by the way. You probably know that if you've listened to us before. Today we're talking about a film called Fargo, came out in 1996. Now, this was actually recommended by Martin Spice, who wrote into us on the official channel. So, directed and written by the Coen Brothers. First Coen Brothers film we have done on the podcast. And I know Nige possibly mentioned one in our top 5 90s one.
Oh, Eagles! Yeah, Hudsucker Proxy
Hudsucker
was
Proxy.
my favourite film of the 1990s, which is the film they did just before Fargo, in fact.
Oh, was it? In fact, Fargo was sandwiched between this and Lebowski, I think.
Yeah, it was indeed, yeah.
So, yeah, a bit of a run. Coen Brothers, for me, when I was about 20, I kind of got into like watching all of their films because I was very much kind of like almost studying them because, the way they make films and stuff like that. So, but I haven't seen many of their films for a long time. So I've seen a lot of their films, but not for 20 years. However, Fargo is one I've watched a number of times, I would say, over the years and kind of revisited. But yeah, Coen Brothers, Fargo. You guys seen this one before we did it for the POG?
For the POG?
POG?
Yeah, I thought you said POG then. I slammed it, mate. I got my slammer out and bam! I watched this probably in the late 90s. Like you, Smith, I watched a lot of Coen Brothers films during my kind of like media production days. Sort of fell in love with a lot of their films. I would argue that the run they had from Blood Simple to The Man Who Wasn't There was the greatest run of directed films by a specific director in contemporary cinema. So that sort of indicates how highly I think of them as a directing pair. Where Fargo fits into that run, I will obviously say later on. But I remember watching it late 90s, VHS, had it on VHS as well. Hadn't seen it in a very long time, though. I couldn't, probably like 5 to 10 years, maybe.
How about you, Eatock? You've seen this one?
Never seen it. Never seen
Oh,
it.
wow.
Wow.
I'd seen like numerous. I'm just looking at their Wikipedia page right now. It's rare that I access the internet when I'm on this podcast. But I was like, well, let me see what films I've seen of theirs. And I was like, yeah, Lebowski, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? No Country for Old Men, Burn After Reading, Hail Caesar I saw at the cinema. So I start with 98, so I start after...
A little bit after Fargo. Yeah.
And the Hudsucker Proxy and Barton Fink, even though I'm aware of all these, and of course Raising Arizona, I remember that, but never actually seen it probably. But yeah, I'd never seen Fargo, and I'd always get Fargo and A Simple Plan confused.
They're very similar.
Yeah.
With Bill Paxton, Simple Plan.
Yeah, Bill Paxton, because I've seen A Simple Plan. I've seen A Simple Plan, and all I remember about both films visually is their kind of key moments in the film. There's like snow and blood and death, and I'm just like, oh, so when I hear Fargo, I'm like, oh, the one with I'm like, no, it's not Paxton or who's the other guy?
Billy Bob
Thornton. That's who I was like, oh, Billy Bob Thornton's in it. And it's like, no, it's not that one.
Although Billy Bob is in one of the recent series of Fargo. The remake.
Oh, is he really?
And
there's an all-star cast in every series, like Martin Freeman, Chris Rock, like all sorts.
Chris Rock is in it.
One of the series, yeah.
The first series of Fargo, the remake, the TV show, I thought was pretty good, actually.
I've heard a lot of good things about the show.
I
think multiple series are very good, in fact. There's
one
with Kirsten Dunst in, and...
that was the second... Yeah, that was good as well, actually.
And then Scott Pilgrim, the person who plays Ramona Flowers...
Mary Elizabeth Winstead.
Yeah, she's in one of the series as well. So there's a lot of very, very high caliber Hollywood casting that goes into these shows.
What's the Coen Brothers' involvement with the series?
Good question. Nice.
They've watched it.
They reviewed it for their podcast, Coen's on Coen.
I'm going to tap into the mainframe. I think they were executive producers. I think they did it kind of with their blessing, but I don't think they've had much involvement beyond that. As far as I'm aware, anyway. Yeah, executive producers and based on. So
nice.
But executive producers often just means they're making some money from it. But
they come and watch the edit and then put their balls on the table and then walk out.
Yeah,
but from my experience, anyway.
That's two sets of balls though, and they're big balls. They're the Coen Brothers balls.
Mighty big balls.
Oh,
And the film stars, going back to the 1996 version, so it stars William H. Macy, who plays Jerry, Frances McDormand, who we've spoke about in potentially 2 episodes before, Nomadland and Primal Fear. Who plays Marge, Steve Buscemi, who plays Carl, Peter Stormare, who plays Gare, not sure how he says it in that kind of Gare. They kind of all say it in those Minnesotian accents. And yeah, Etok, I asked you to do a little synopsis.
Which I'd completely forgot about. So here's me. So William H. Macy, Jerry, hires 2 men to kidnap his wife. Some would say that's a simple plan. Unfortunately, what happens is it all goes a bit Pete Tong, and there's a murder. There's a lot of murders. There's actually quite a few murders of officials, police officers, and what also happens is that Frances McDormand, she's a police officer, and she decides, I'm going to solve this crime, as all police officers should do.
Have you seen this film?
Yeah, I'm sure I have, but I'm sure it's a pretty tight synopsis.
William H. Macy's character, Jerry, the reason why he's had his wife kidnapped is because his wife and his dad, sort of father-in-law, are both very rich, and he's in a hell of a lot of debt because he's done a lot of very dodgy things as part of his dealership. The 2 people he hires are sort of recommendations from one of the mechanics that works at his place. Frances McDormand, as Etok said, is like the chief police, but she's also like 7 or 8 months pregnant, and she's very on the ball despite appearances, because you think this kind of mild-mannered lady cop type thing plays against convention. And yeah, as Etok alluded to, things get pretty messed up pretty quick, and there's a lot of incompetence, I would say, shown.
Once upon a time.
Looks like she's gonna turn cold tomorrow. Yeah, you got that right.
There was a salesman called Jerry Lundergaard.
Okay, real good then.
who always dreamt of striking it rich.
Wade, have you had a chance to think about that deal I was talking about, those 40 acres there in Wayzata?
Jerry, we're not going to just give you $750,000.
No, but see,
But there's like this real kind of like homely feeling. I think they call the place sort of Fargo where it's set, and they use the name Fargo rather than the place that it is actually set because it's just sounded a lot better. I think the place was like Brain or Bird something or other.
No, Brainan is the
Brainan, that's it. Yeah. They called it like Siberia with cafes. That's the difference.
I think that's the first thing you notice with this film, isn't it? You know, it's cold, it's misty, it's isolating, barren. Everyone's kind of dressed in these huge coats and jackets and gloves and hats, and you know, you're basically those first opening shots of this film. The cinematography is great, you know, often kind of very big wides and.
I was going to say any good movie, like right off the bat, should always establish like the visual feel of it, and I think this film does that expertly. You watch it and there's isolation, you feel like you're in the middle of nowhere, it's snowing, it's cold, you get a real sense of atmosphere, and it sets the mood for the entire film, I think. And I was just like, oh, this is
and you're never removed from that atmosphere for the whole film, you know. It's
not
always...
really, even when they go out, like when it's a sunny day and stuff, you've always got trace elements of snow somewhere or this, that and the other. It's there's that constant reminder that you're somewhere else, almost otherworldly. It's not like, you know, Los Angeles or New York or all these places we've been before. This really does feel like an isolated part of America. Yeah,
exactly. And that's also accentuated by the people and the accents and the characters, because obviously with Fargo, the first thing I thought of, which we've already kind of joked about, is the, oh yeah, Jeeze, and basically like how they talk to each other, and especially Marge and Norm, her husband, the way they kind of interact through their dialogue. It's all very innocent. It's innocent, but it's kind of, it's comedy, but it feels quite real at the same time, because people obviously do talk like that.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. Is that useful to you?
Oh, you betcha, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to be offensive to any Minnesotans that are listening to this, but it also makes them sound a little bit thick, I would say. A little bit slow, a little bit simple in some respects.
Well, I think that's the only thing that would put people off this movie, I think. And I imagine this film with a completely shit cast, and it would be a laughing stock. But I think the performances are so good from those actors that play the natives of Minnesota.
They're so dry as well. Like, there's jokes and they're just like, oh yeah, that was funny. And it's just like, they don't sort of, there's no exaggeration of emotion or anything like that. But sorry, yeah, go on, Ito.
No, that's perfect. That what you said there. That's a great point, is that there are moments in other films where you'd get reactions to something or laughter in terms of the characters conversing with one another. In this, as we've said, it's kind of natural, but it's also, again, I keep using the phrase otherworldly. It feels very unique. It feels this film has a very unique literal voice that you imagine like characters talking like this in, you know, sorry to bring this up, but like an MCU movie. It just wouldn't work. You'd be like, well, I don't understand. Why are they talking like this? This doesn't feel like normal conversations. It feels, and that's, I think, one of the strongest points of this film is it just takes us away from a lot of the normal stuff that we've been used to. But that accent, could easily be parodied, and, you know, numerous times I'm sure throughout this recording we're going to try and do it. I tried to do it before we started, and I was thinking to myself, oh yeah, and I was like, no, but I'm going Irish. Like, I watched
that's
it.
what I did at the start. It's so easy to sort of do that. Yeah. And I'm terrible at accents anyway, so, but I'm sure like Smith will cut lots of wonderful clips in. Insert clip now.
Yeah, hon? Yeah, he's here. Yeah, I'll catch him for you, hon. Yeah. It's Dad.
Yeah.
Actually, one thing we should probably go right back to, which I've just thought about, right at the start of this film, it says, this is a true story. But I think, you know, everybody knows the fact with this film that is massive dramatic poetic license.
I didn't know that. Is that like a big porky pie?
I think basically it kind of is. I think there were some events that were kind of based on this,
very,
but
very loosely based.
So loose. But
you can see this being a true story.
Absolutely.
Well, 3 weeks after filming, the cast found out it wasn't based on a true story. And the reason why the Coen brothers said they used it was because it just makes people more interested. They're more involved. They're like, oh, wow, okay, this is a true story. And it definitely works, I would say.
But the funny thing is, like I say, I think this does feel like a true story, though, like a dramatization of events. You can see this kind of stuff probably has happened where someone's arranged for their wife or husband or loved one to be kidnapped only for it to end badly. I'm sure there are probably documented cases in this sense. But yeah, I can see this kind of thing happening. So I think having that at the start, it kind of gives it validity. It gives the story a little bit more validity. Unnecessary, but I get why they did it in a way.
Yeah, sometimes in films there's that line at the beginning and the film's not that great and it makes the film better, if that makes sense. I'm not saying it does with this film.
You give it more leeway, I would say.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, okay, I can understand why it's not gone to the kind of realms of unbelievability because it's based on truth. And sometimes, I think it does give you a bit more acceptance. And yet, I guess what happens in this film as it goes on, that almost like things are so stupid. You're like, how could someone be that stupid? some of the things are just sort of completely out there, decisions that are made. It's not overly exaggerated because, as we've kind of already touched upon, like a lot of the characters, the dialogue, the way they communicate with each other is almost stilted or so low key that when something absolutely bonkers does happen later in the film, certainly in the final sort of 15 minutes that we won't sort of go into right this second, you're like, bloody hell, like where did that come from almost? Because it kind of slowly and so beautifully, I would say, ramps things up just as things spiral further and further out of control. Certainly for William H. Macy's character, who's kind of central to everything.
So, we all set on this thing then? You want your own wife kidnapped? Now her dad, he's real well off. So why don't you just ask him for the money?
Hon? Wade, it's Jerry. I don't know what to do. It's something hard, Jeeze. It's terrible.
But in a place called Fargo...
Mr. Lundegaard? I'm a police officer from up Brainerd investigating some malfeasance.
Anything can happen.
How's Jean?
Who's Jean?
My wife.
Oops.
Well, I think that's a good point to actually pick up on William H. Macy and his character, Jerry. He's this kind of sneaky car salesman. He's pretty
jittery,
erratic. He puts himself... He kind of digs himself deeper and deeper into a hole, but he also has a son, it's worth pointing out, and the kind of relationship he has with his son is very odd. It's very clinical. There's barely any kind of physical contact. And him and his wife, they're barely in the film together in this film because she's kidnapped. So you only see them in maybe one or two scenes right at the front, which I found really interesting. That you don't.
She's such a sweetheart as well. I love her character.
She's so great. But you don't actually get the time to develop any kind of like relationship between the two of them. All you're going on really is his what you're telling him or what he's telling the audience, which I found really interesting the way they kind of played with that.
I don't think there's any kind of like malice felt towards his wife. Like, there's clearly not a great relationship with his father-in-law, but with his wife, it's just a means to an end. Like, okay, she'll be kidnapped, she'll be fine, get the money, everything will be fine. And like you say, with this kid, it's really noticeable after she gets kidnapped and he's like discussing it with someone else. They're like, oh, look after what's going on with the boy kind of thing. And he's like, oh yeah, like he hadn't even crossed his mind to think about the boy. It's like that shows he's so narrow focused based on his debts, and basically he has to loan a car to the two kidnappers, and that's something that comes back to bite him.
But it's such obvious stupidity again, isn't it? And it's like,
oh yeah, there's a paper trail. There's all sorts of things that are going to catch up.
Dorky characters making stupid mistakes, and it's just like, you can see how it's like decisions that can only be made in this world. That it doesn't make it like you're frustrated that William H. Macy would be so stupid, but it's like, oh no, but I understand the context of this film, it works, especially when you see his character so early on being such a dork. But we talk about his wife being kidnapped and his attitude. William H. Macy's character in the film, Jerry's attitude is, oh, she's going to be fine, I've got these two kidnappers. But the moment we meet these two kidnappers right at the beginning of the film, so you got Steve Buscemi, who's clearly, always on edge, as his characters in most films always are so wonderfully. And I love him in pretty much every film he's ever been in. So good. And then you got Pete,
the funny looking one.
Yeah, the funny looking.
He's kind of funny looking. What do you mean?
Kind of funny looking.
That's such a great moment that it happens 2 or 3 times in the film. It's like, what do you look like? He's a funny looking fella.
Well, what does this guy look like, anyways?
Oh, he's a little guy, kind of funny looking.
Uh-huh. In what way?
Oh, just in a general kind of way.
Okay. Well, thanks a bunch, Mr. Mora. You're right. It's probably nothing. But thanks for calling her in.
Sure.
Yeah, and then you see, you got Steve Buscemi, then you got Peter Stormare as this very silent, big guy, and it's like, I wouldn't trust him to kidnap my wife. He's just terrified.
It's so different to Buscemi because he's very quiet, but he's also really unpredictable.
Well, as we find out,
scary.
He's a brooder.
It's scary, but to begin with, Buscemi seems like the head, the
brains,
the ideas, the brains. That's the word. Head. The brains behind it. But actually, their relationship together is crucial to this film working well.
Where's Pancake's house?
What?
We stop at Pancake's house.
What are you, nuts? We have pancakes for breakfast. Gotta go to a place where I can get a shot and a beer and steak, maybe. Not more fucking pancakes. Come on. Oh, come on, man. Okay, here's an idea. We can stop outside of Brainerd. I know a place there we can get laid. What do you think?
I'm fucking hungry now, you know.
Yeah, Jesus. I'm saying we can stop, get pancakes, and then we'll get laid, all right?
When we first see that they're getting into the house, when the kidnapping's about to happen and they're at the window, and Jean is just like, she's just staring.
It's like she's watching she is watching TV, and she's almost like, TV's come to me, because is this really happening?
They're about to break in, and it's just her look of utter disbelief that she does what a lot of people would actually do, and just kind of freeze rather than do anything. So she's like, are they actually going to break in? And then smash, they come through, and but it gets to the point where they chase her upstairs into the bathroom, and I thought this was really good, and I totally forgot about this scene where she tries to get out the window. We cut away, we see what's his character called, Peter Stormare break into the bathroom, looks at the window, looks in the mirror, and sees the shower curtain is drawn, and then as the audience I'm like, oh shit, that's great, because I totally forgot about that. And then obviously
classic misdirection. Yes.
yeah, but really nice little red herring there.
So Peter Stormare's character only has 18 lines of dialogue in the entire film.
I believe that, yeah.
And never says more than a complete sentence at any one time. By comparison, Steve Buscemi has over 150 lines, so you can sort of tell the comparison between those two.
Yeah, their relationship is basically what you'd call a powder keg. It's like, oh yeah, they're working together. I don't know how these two characters came together. It doesn't strike me as they've known each other for a long time, because they clearly haven't. So they've obviously been, cobbled together in some way, but you can tell that at any moment it could go off, even in like the earliest scenes when they're in the car driving somewhere, like you say with Steve Buscemi saying, we're just going to sit here in silence then, and Peter Stormare not giving a damn. But then obviously one of the first big moments in the film, aside from the kidnapping, is the murder of the police officer, which is so unpredictable. And again, Steve Buscemi is thinking, his fault is that he thinks he's charming and he's cool and calculated, but he's really not. Steve Buscemi is a bit of a dick, and almost like Jerry's character in a way, quite unpredictable and a bit like erratic. And you've got that moment in the car where they're pulled over by the police officer, and Steve Buscemi's like, I'm going to take care of business. And then the moment the police officer susses that something's not up, without hesitation, Peter Stormare just shoots him in the head. You're flabbergasted by this. I'm sure, we know Steve Buscemi in his roles probably killed before and done heinous acts. But even this act of like brutalism catches him off guard, and it's so wonderful to see that. It is, because now you think, oh wow, now they're in trouble, and then one of the, oh my god, I couldn't believe it when the car drive. And I'd seen that clip before, just the moment where you see the shot of the two people drive, the witnesses, they're driving past in the other direction. They look and they see Steve Buscemi with the dead body, and then blooming Peter Stormare just gets in the car, spins it around, and chases after them. And there's this great scene where he's just driving after them. There's just two red lights in the distance where Peter Stormare's chasing down these two witnesses. And then the lights disappear and you're like, oh, what happened there? And then you see it off to the side of the road. And he just executes them.
It's interesting, like, again, going back to the dynamic between sort of Steve Buscemi as Carl and Peter Stormare as sort of Guy, how Steve Buscemi, I guess, is slightly dangerous in this film because he thinks he's smarter than he actually is. Like, it's his fault a lot of things go wrong. He forgets to change the plates, for instance, which is like basically part of the reason why they get pulled over. And you actually think that this sort of crime duo, I suppose, have been brought together based on the recommendation of a guy called Shep, who, as we mentioned before, works for William H. Macy as part
Shep Proudfoot.
And he vouched for someone, and you think, oh, okay, he's vouched for someone. And looking at the two characters, you think, well, he vouched for Steve Buscemi, it's kind of like the brain. But actually, later in the film, you found out he actually vouched for Peter Stormare's character instead. So as Smith sort of made a point of mentioning earlier, when the shit hits the fan, he is extremely decisive and does things right. A lot of the mistakes those two make are just where Kyle has just basically fucked up, just made a really big mistake. Yeah. And again, he sort of acts quite irrationally, and a lot of people die because of poor decisions that he's made.
Do you fancy sending us a film to review or letting us know your thoughts on a film that we have discussed? All of your comments will be read out in our end of season leaderboard episode. Email us on offradarpod@gmail.com, tweet us at offradarpodcast, message us on Facebook. All links and info in the description down below.
Do it! Do it!
Then we're introduced to Margie and her husband.
Well, yeah, and it's like half an hour into the film. So and she's top billed, and it's after like 33 minutes or something.
And her character straight away is so wonderfully almost defined, as we've already talked about. It's these very almost like people that would be kind of alien to us in the way they talk. The relationship between she and her husband. I
think the fact she's pregnant as well makes it really interesting that she's quite big and she's very womanly, but at the same time she's such an alpha woman.
Well, that's, I do love, and we see that straight away, is that she goes to the crime scene, and the way we're presented with these characters, as Nigel said, this accent, this almost like the dialect, it does sound a bit slow, for want of a better word, and yet the moment she gets to the crime scene, she kind of like puts everything together really quickly.
And so simply as well. Just very, very clear. Just like she's got it figured out. She's not panicking or rushing.
And then she gets in the car with the other cop. They're driving along, and he's like, yeah, we're looking for
a DLR plate.
DLR plate. And she's like, maybe that stood for something. And she goes, I'm going to try to do the accent. I think I'm going to have to disagree with you there. No, I've got Irish again.
I disagree with your police work there.
I disagree with you. Pot of gold.
Hello. It comes every episode. We can't help ourselves.
I'm going to have to disagree with you. No.
Again,
you sound like a goblin, Smith.
Edit some clips in and save us all the embarrassment.
It's in the head and the hand there. I guess that's a defensive wound.
Oh, yeah?
Where's the state trooper?
Back there, a good piece, in the ditch next to his prowler.
Okay. So we got a trooper pull someone over. We got a shooting. These folks drive by. There's a high-speed pursuit. Ends here, and then this execution type deal.
Yeah.
I'd be very surprised if our suspect was from Brainerd.
Yeah.
I think her relationship with Lou is and his face just makes me laugh. I know that sounds really just because he's like so like kind of dopey.
He really is. That's a really good observation.
He's almost like Lurch out of Addams Family.
I get what you mean.
He's a bit gormless, but like she's like you said, really intelligent like cop and kind of like solving this whole case. So, but whoever she is with, she has the comedy with. So with Lou, or even Norm, her husband, who he's eating in pretty much.
Yeah, I was going to say, with those two are only in scenes where they're either in bed or eating. Like every single scene is one or the other,
and Norm has that really wonderful, completely inconsequential subplot where he's a painter, or he's illustrating to try and get his work on a stamp.
That's
and
right,
it's just, but I love that little subplot that's got no nothing implication on the plot, nothing whatsoever. But it's a nice little sub story showing that you've got this crazy shit going on in all the crime and everything, and then this little subplot story, which is almost like the most important thing in their lives at that.
I was going to say,
time.
they've got equal significance in their lives. It's like just because this sort of huge case has happened, and Marge is out there sort of solving it, putting herself in a dangerous situation. It's no different than someone getting his artwork on a 3-cent stamp, and it kind of shows that their priorities in life. And towards the end of the film, Frances McDormand kind of explains to one of the bad guys, like, there's a lot more to life than money, kind of thing. And she's so grounded, and their relationship is so grounded. But there is a subplot as well, which has actually been kind of referenced as one of the most pointless subplots in movie history, but there is a reason behind it, where an ex-classmate of hers kind of rings her up randomly and asks her to kind of go on a date.
Is it Mike?
Yeah, so it's
so awkward. Yeah,
so she goes to meet him when she's doing investigations, I think, in Minneapolis, and sort of goes there, and they meet up for dinner, and he's a little bit forward but super awkward in terms of it kind of expressing. They're obviously old high school friends, and it turns out that his wife has sadly sort of passed away, and he's kind of trying to basically hit on Marge because it's someone from his past that he had sort of feelings for and everything else. And everyone's kind of always scratched their head and been like, this is so random. Why is this scene even in the film? But it kind of indicates, like, just through that scene, that Marge figures out another piece of the puzzle. So it's there for a reason. It makes sense why that's part of the film, but it seems slightly off kilter with everything else. But again, it kind of shows, it's interesting seeing Marge kind of dressed up. She's not being a cop. She's just being someone out, sort of more of a human character away from that kind of cop environment. But it's really an interesting part of the film.
I remembered, I always liked you.
Well, I always liked you.
I always liked you so much.
I think one of the most dislikable characters in the film is the dad, the father. I forget his name, unfortunately.
The
father-in-law.
Now, he is someone, here's an early bit of Nige trivia. So this is Harve Presnell, who was kind of like a well-known character actor of the 1960s. And I think...
Oh, wow.
He essentially didn't make a film for 20 years until he got cast in Fargo. So kind of came back. He was in a lot of kind of... golden age of like musicals and westerns. Those were kind of his bread and butter in those times. But just didn't do anything for years and years. Came back, did Fargo, ended up doing stuff like Saving Private Ryan. He is not very nice. You can see why Jerry's kind of at his wit's end having this person in his life.
He's really dislikable in this, and he obviously later in the film he takes it upon himself to go and really stupidly, and Jerry has no control over the fact that he's going to go and get her back, and obviously this is going to all backfire even more as it goes on. One thing I just wanted to bring up actually is, obviously we've talked about the deaths in this film. They're violent, but once again, like this kind of very comic violence in the sense that they're not like completely shocking. And I think maybe that's down to the fact that quite often it's a black comedy, so you've often got some kind of humour after it. For instance, there's obviously one of the most iconic scenes ever in Fargo or any Coen Brothers film. Peter Stormare is putting Steve Buscemi's leg in a wood chipper, and I think, like with all of the deaths, you've got this massive contrast of that bright red with the snow.
Yeah.
And that is so effective in this film throughout, because it really like accentuates that fact that death is final. And I know that sounds like a really ridiculous thing to say, but everything in this film, there's always a bit of comedy. And I've said this, I think, in a previous podcast. So I do worry sometimes when, comedy and drama go hand in hand, that sometimes that drama can get lost. I think in this case it doesn't, because the comedy's done very well.
I'm going to kind of semi-disagree with you, Smith. I understand completely.
Do you think?
I understand completely where you're coming from, and like you say, the famous wood chipper death is hilarious. Like, it's hilarious in the sense of it's so like, oh my god, and then Peter Stormare's character is so dark. But when you look at those early murders, I don't think there's much levity in the cop being shot, and especially those poor two witnesses. Like the girl in the car is like stuck there, trapped, and Peter Stormare's just like bang.
Well, when Marge comes along, she says it's a defensive kill because she's got a hole in her hand where she put her hand in front of her face.
Bit, that's such a key little piece of dialogue, and it's so sad because, like you say, she obviously had her hand up, defensive injury, like defensive wound, so it goes through her hand, through her head, and kills her. But I understand where you're coming from, Smith. Like, when Steve Buscemi, we're jumping forward a little bit here, but when Steve Buscemi's character is off with the axe, that is partially funny because something's going to happen, but it's so sudden and brutal that it catches you off guard, and it is kind of funny, where he's just like, Peter Stormare's character runs out of the cabin like, rah! Or he's silent.
Half the film, he's got a massive gash on his face, hasn't he? Steve Buscemi's character.
From when he meets the dad to do the deal in one of the most frustrating moments in the film, because Jerry wants to do the money exchange, and again, it's clever in the sense Jerry's playing, because he's going to get $1 million off the dad. The two guys think they're getting 80,000 in total, because at one point they changed it and they're like, we want the entire 80,000 now. Jerry's like,
murdered people.
Yeah, it's like, okay, I'll give you the 80,000, but secretly Jerry has asked for $1 million, so he's got $1 million in this satchel. And the dad decides, because he's such a proud, arrogant man, he's like, well, I'm going to go and do it. I'm going to save my daughter. Drives to meet Steve Buscemi in a I loved this scene. It's so good because you don't know who to root for. They're both very dislikable guys.
And they both think they know best as well. I think that's the key.
Yes,
like they think they know better than everyone else, and it's proven not only in this scene but the subsequent scene. They really don't.
They really don't.
That's absolutely, yeah.
That's perfect.
Well, they're both so selfish, aren't they?
Yeah.
And they're out for themselves, and like from that very moment, they're never as a team trying to do this together. And I think that's the difference between them and Marge and Lou, who obviously are.
With Marge, I think, like, it's coming back to this, we've kind of touched upon it already, but at no point does Marge think she knows best. She just does. And she does it in such a way where she never offends anyone. She never, tramples over anyone. She's just very clear, very matter of fact.
The only time you see her slightly losing her temper or her patience is when she goes back to talk to Jerry, and he's being a dick, and she goes, you don't need to have that kind of tone with me.
Yeah, it's quite motherly almost. Again, it's more like that than a cop. Like a cop, you would expect to kick off and slam him up against a wall or something like that.
And what a fantastic, we got on that. Like Frances McDormand, she totally steals the show in this film.
Oh, it's amazing.
As in, her
I think
acting.
You're doing a disservice to how good William H. Macy is.
William H. Macy. Yeah. No, he's awesome as well. But I'm so used to William H. Macy being
that character.
Amazing.
He's the same character in Boogie Nights.
Exactly. Yeah,
this was one of his first films.
The same character.
And he was desperate to get this role. And he was nominated Best Supporting Actor, but obviously Frances McDormand won an Oscar for Best Actress in a Leading Role for Fargo. Yeah, and she before this had done, as we mentioned, a few films. She'd been in Blood Simple as well with the Coens. She's married to one of the Coen brothers as well, so there's obviously that relationship. But yeah, she's incredible for this. But she said going into this film that she wanted a kind of role to sort of defy convention. She wanted to be like a prostitute or a murderer. Ended up taking a role as like a pregnant cop, and she said it was like the greatest gift she's ever had to get such a brilliant role that's written so well. Again, this film won an Oscar for Best Screenplay as well, so it just goes to show the sort of quality on show.
And maybe your point there is doing William H. Macy a disservice. Maybe it is because her character is so likeable in this that I kind of recognise Frances McDormand more for her acting than some of the others, because equally, they're all great in this film. Like Steve Buscemi's been in a few Coen Brothers films as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. Almost everyone.
Obviously in Lebowski. Yeah.
It's like an auteurs again that they just cast a lot of the same people. Like he's like a bartender in The Hudsucker Proxy. He's obviously got a prominent role in The Big Lebowski. There's a lot of little things.
A prominent silent role in The Big Lebowski. Shut up, Jerry. I love
but the role was written specifically for Steve Buscemi as well. So that's again another reason why kind of they want their people around them to do like such fantastic work. But I think in the case of sort of going back to sort of William H. Macy, there was a lot of sort of discussion afterwards about how he accentuated the role by ad-libbing it quite a lot. But he said in interviews that all like the mannerisms and sort of all the like stuttering and everything he did, it was all in the script.
Wow, that must have been some script.
That good and that clear. I think one of the few things where they kind of did put things in is where William H. Macy makes suggestions for his character. So, for instance, there's a scene when after his wife's been kidnapped, he goes back to the house and you hear him sort of on the phone to sort of reporting it, but he's not. He's just like practicing, and that was a William H. Macy suggestion to do that.
That's such a good little moment.
Oh yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah, Wade, it's Jerry. Wade, it's Jerry. We gotta talk. It's something hard, Jeeze. It's terrible.
One of the things I laughed at, another laugh-out moment in the film, which I thought was brilliant, because again, it's timing. You know, she's asking Jerry for evidence, and he goes, "I'll just get the car, you know, the sheets for you, the paperwork that you want to look at." And Jerry walks out of shot, and then it cuts to like Frances McDormand, and she's like sitting in the office, looking around, and then you see the window, and then a car just drives past, and it's Jerry exiting. It's just like, oh my god,
it's so good.
But it's just so funny the way she looks, and he's just driving past the window as if like nothing's happening.
Oh, for Pete's sake.
Well, once again, that balance of comedy is right there, because they could go further with that and have him running down the street, but it would be so slapsticky, silly that it probably is too far. Because that black comedy is often like bits like that. It's some people might not find that funny, but you know, like it's kind of that line between the comedy is just right. The tone,
absolutely,
is what I'm getting at.
I got to say that one of the saddest scenes prior to Buscemi's killing, Buscemi goes back to the barn. Peter Stormare's just sitting there eating like a TV dinner, and you see the wife's body on the floor.
Yeah, and it's just like splattered all up against the oven, which they don't open to keep it warm.
So sad. And
but
it's
again,
just like
it's his character, like Peter Stormare's character, of just like he just gets annoyed by noise, by chatter, and it kind of. It's obviously it got to that point with the wife, the person they've kidnapped, and it clearly gets to that point with Steve Buscemi. He's fed up with his incompetence. He's fed up with his sort of endless talking, and that's why he grabs the axe and does what he does.
The final like confrontation where she chases Peter's like Stormare onto the. I'm guessing that's like a lake,
like a frozen lake. It's the frozen
which is
lake.
really.
Yeah.
And I thought, is that going to play a part? But it's quite matter of fact and final, which I really love about it. It's not a big Hollywood overblown gun battle or this, that, or the other. It's just she kind of confronts him, hobbles him, as it were, like shoots him.
Well, it's very similar to the execution at the start where he takes out the guy who runs away. Like she does the same, but she wings him. She shoots him in like the backside or the leg, so he goes down. And it shows the difference between those characters. Like he's just executioner. She's a cop. She takes him down. She does what she needs to do. She doesn't know. Like I know there's a lot in the press at the moment about American cops and excessive force. Obviously, she's just brilliant at her job, so just takes him down.
They just go back to their normal life. That's one of the things I love about this movie. It feels like this crazy Hollywood plot that kind of takes place in this small little town of nobodies, and yet it's kind of like the nobodies that stop everything, that solve it, as it were. It's
the out-of-towners that kind of mess everything up, isn't it?
Yes, there you go.
Those two criminals.
But you never get the big feds coming in.
No, exactly.
The case or anything like that, which you would get in most kind of Hollywood films. And even if they don't take over the case, go the detectives or the CID or whatever. In this case, it is. You're right. Everyone feels so much more connected, which I think is why this film works really well, because everyone is part of this community, even though they are slightly out of towner. They're still part of that same world, and like you beautifully said at the beginning, it does feel like a different world, this whole film, and that's why I think it works very well.
I would like to discuss the score and the music of this film, because we haven't even touched upon that, and I think it is incredible. It's by someone called Carter Burwell, who's worked with the Coens for a very long time, did Blood Simple, did the Hudsucker Proxy, which is one of my favourite scores in cinema history, I would say. Also did some ones that link back to some of our previous podcasts. So Doc Hollywood, for instance, Wayne's World 2, bizarrely. Also did like a Goofy movie, so Etok, a bit of a cartoon love there.
Wow, Goofy movie, I don't remember.
He's done some strange things like Joe's Apartment, you might remember, like The Jackal with Bruce Willis, Big Lebowski, of course, Velvet Goldmine, Three Kings. There's so many random films on here. Adaptation, The Rookie as well, with I think Charlie Sheen. I think this score is really understated, but it suits the rest of the film absolutely perfectly. It's so, from the, like you were saying about the brilliant opening shot, the way the score sort of brings up into a big crescendo. Yes. I just think it's just beautiful. It suits it down to the ground. I don't think anyone could have done a better job with it. It's not filled with like contemporary music, like jumping in at every opportunity. It's just, there's never a point of it being style over substance. It just suits the film absolutely perfectly.
Tell me what these fellas looked like.
Well, the little guy, he was kind of funny looking.
Can you be any more specific?
He wasn't circumcised.
Geez, that's a good lead.
Yeah. From the creators of Barton Fink.
I'm cooperating here. And there's no,
And Raising Arizona.
What do you fellas got yourself mixed up in?
Oh, jeez.
You're there in 30 minutes or I find you, Jerry, and I shoot you, and I shoot your wife, and I shoot all your little children, and I shoot them all in the back of their little heads. You got it?
You should see the other guy.
Trivia, of course. Wouldn't be an Off-Radar podcast without me reeling off some random stuff. So I think one of the really interesting things about Frances McDormand, I sort of mentioned earlier the fact she kind of wanted a role where she was like a prostitute or a murderer, and she ended up getting this one. But as we mentioned, like the accent is iconic, and it's not an easy accent, as Etok and I have proven trying to do it during this podcast.
And Goblin Smith, let's not leave
Goblin
it.
Smith. Don't forget good old Goblin Smith.
I think mine's quite good.
But she actually she practiced it quite a lot with one of the other cast members. So hooker number one, so two of the two sort of bad guys. Yeah. Like one of the hookers,
No way.
she actually used to kind of learn the accent, because it was authentic for her. Her name's Larissa Coconut, hooker number one, and she referred to her accent and mannerisms as Minnesota nice. So there you go. That is so yeah. And then in terms of, we mentioned like William H. Macy being sort of brilliant in this. As said, he got nominated for an Oscar. He was desperate to do this film. As soon as he read the script, he auditioned twice. He didn't hear anything, thought he'd kind of blown his chance. So what he actually did, he flew to New York to confront the Coens and sort of said where they were basically starting the production of the film, and almost like begged them, and he said, I'm very, very worried that you're going to screw up this movie by giving this role to someone else. It's my rule, and I'll shoot your dogs if you don't give it to me. He was joking, of course, but it did enough to get him the film. So sometimes
I'm
you've got to be...
surprised they didn't cast him as Carl.
Yeah,
well, this is it. Yeah, he kind of went to the extreme. And then there's also a brilliant scene sort of quite early on where Jerry's character is trying to like sell a car to a couple, and they're determined not to have this kind of, what is it? It's like extra layer of...
It's the paint, isn't it? It's like the waterproof like covering or something.
Yeah, and they get very irate, and Jerry's just a dick. He even goes into his like boss's room.
Pretends.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's almost based verbatim on a real life experience of Ethan Coen. So he was like, I'll get that in as part of the film. So there you go.
Wow.
So that bit is based on a true story.
Yeah, that's the bit in the
That's
movie.
where it came in.
Well, the final bit of trivia, I'm sorry if I'm going into trivia overdrive. We haven't really spoken about the bit where Carl buries the money that he gets. He buries it in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah,
and the problem was, because a lot of people watched this film and thought it was based on a true story, there have been reports since it came out of people going to Fargo to try and dig up this sort of mystery sort of bag of cash, and given how cold it is and how awful it is, some of those experiences have ended quite badly. But it does actually tie in to the series Fargo, and you find out kind of what happens to the bag. So
fantastic.
So there you go.
We need your help. We are looking to grow Off-Radar and release more and more high-quality content. Please give us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your pod. And why not share with your friends and loved ones?
Help me help you.
So, Ratings and reviews. Shall we start with Martin, who recommended this film for us?
Yes, please.
So Martin wrote in and he's written this. I will start off by saying that Fargo is one of my favourites, the kind of film where I notice something new most times I watch it. Probably my first experience of black comedy. I remember buying it on VHS around 1997 in Our Price.
Nice, Our Price. Good callback.
Having never heard of it before and only recognising the name as Steve Buscemi on the cover, I thought I'd give it a go. I liked that at the start the viewer is told it's a true story, and of course, but the story told really does come across of something that could easily have happened.
Yeah, great.
I think it's a really good cast, really well acted. I find myself strangely sorry for Jerry Lundegaard and almost hoping he gets away with it. It has great twists, and the relationship between the couple's partners, including the kidnappers, Carl and Gia, are fun to watch, especially with those accents. The Fargo TV series that followed this some years later is really good too, and really follows the atmosphere of the original. I love the little Easter eggs, like the ice scraper being left to mark the spot in the film and later being found in the TV series. So Martin gives this a 10 out of 10. He also says, thanks for the podcast. Really enjoy it. Thank you so much, Martin, for listening and for that awesome recommendation and review that you have written.
We've also rebranded. We've rebranded. Smith's now calling it a podcast. So yeah,
podcast. Welcome to the podcast.
Yes.
I think let's go to Nige. I feel like Nige might like this film.
Knowing Nige. Yeah.
I hate it. What are you on about? No, that's not true. Yeah, I think the review we've just heard was pretty spot on. Like, I've got a lot of time for this film. As I said it right at the start, I feel like this run of films, I think it was 9 films by the Coen Brothers up to like Intolerable Cruelty, which I really didn't get on with, were all brilliant films. And this may well be the best, albeit I'm an absolute huge fan of Hudsucker. I think Frances McDormand's brilliant. I think William H. Macy's brilliant. I think the script's unbelievable. I just think it all comes together so perfectly. The film is only, I think, about 96 minutes long, so it's not one of these pointlessly drawn out films just for the sake of it. It doesn't explore things that have no reason. It's not about the style in the sense of it's not over stylized. Just everything about it is pulled together so incredibly well. Maybe when I watched it when I was a bit younger, I enjoyed it. It was like the sort of the violence, the Steve Buscemi, the macabre sort of elements to it, the sort of dry humour. But I think this is a film that's got even better for me with age. Going back and watching it, it's not aged badly. It's just such a well put together film, and for me, it's a 10 out of 10 as well.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Really? I'd already written 10 down for Nigel on my spreadsheet.
No way.
I'm so predictable.
No, not predictable. It's just that I knew you liked this film a lot.
I knew you'd love this film. I knew you were a Coen Brothers fan. I didn't quite see you going 10, but there you go. Wow.
I could see it because it's
E-Top, what do you think?
So
of this film?
it's one of those. I forget what the last film. I think it was Once Upon a Time in the West, where I said I wish I'd seen this film sooner, or I wish I'd discovered it sooner. I think that's the case with Fargo. I always knew that Fargo was a good movie. I'd always heard really good things about it. And it's a unique film. I can actually see some people watching this and going, I don't get it. And I understand that, because I think it's somewhat of an acquired taste of a movie, because it is kind of, I think that's fair, it does subvert what you kind of expect that plot to be. Like we've said, there's no, every time you think it could effortlessly go into that Hollywood cliche in certain things of like, oh yeah, now we're going to get like the FBI turn up, or now there's going to be something. Everything happens like I've said before, since the start of this episode, it all feels like within this little world, and it feels like a Hollywood plot being brought into this little world and how they handle it. And I think the film has so much going for it, like from the amazing cast, great acting, wonderful setting. Like the music is something I'll admit I didn't appreciate. I did initially at the start of the movie, because you can't miss that kind of crescendo as it builds up. But I think one of the things I love about this movie most is it never loses sight of the story it's trying to tell, and it has all these little bits and pieces peppered in, as with I've seen numerous Coen Brothers films, and it's how they make movies, and it's why their movies are so revered. I look at films I've seen over the last 10, 12, 15 years, like, obviously I'm going to go to a lot of the Marvel stuff, a lot of the superheroes, and go like, why do I understand the context that they're different kinds of movies, but why do I rate these so highly when you see something like Fargo and think, shit, this is what filmmaking is supposed to be? So with that, I'm going for like a 9 out of 10.
Oh, nice.
I think it's like fantastic. I was, blown away by it.
Really nicely said, both of you. I don't have much more to say. That's all I got to say about that. The one thing, it was a really interesting point that, both of you said, but the point you made, Nige, about it not feeling like style over substance in this film, and I think that's a really good point, and something I didn't even think about the style of it apart from at the beginning with the opening shots and the kind of mood of it. I actually think that a lot of the Coen Brothers films are style, and sometimes it's hard for me to judge. I haven't watched them for 20 years, so I couldn't say now if they were over substance, but that was my feeling at the time. This one does not. It's so brilliant in the way it all comes together. I feel like the performances are awesome. I think the writing is so clever. So often we're used to seeing writing often having some flaws, like it can't quite finish the film very well, or it can't, there's a character that you just like, what the fuck are they doing in there? And, in this film, like the writing is almost kind of flawless from that point of view. I'm not always a massive... I like kind of crime thriller stuff, but it's not like my go-to genre. It's not a genre that I will seek out to watch. I'll often find the genre fine, but, I often kind of quite enjoy it, but it's not like a genre that I love. It's just not one that I hold dear to my heart. Whereas with Fargo, I would say that of that genre, it's like one of my favourite films. What else can I say that's good? Weirdly, the music I didn't really notice either, but maybe that's a good thing. Like at the start of the film, I didn't write a note down on it, but it's probably that good that I didn't need to write a note down on it. Often music is overused in film. We see it, like Etok made the comparison to Marvel, but you see any new film now where the music is almost so loud in the mix.
It's always at the forefront before the actual movie.
Yeah, exactly. And in this film, it's really not. There's scenes where they're in a cafe or a thing and there's no music, and that's so important in filmmaking and storytelling to let those stories play out, and then the music enhances that, and that's obviously what it does. So I wrote down a score, but I think I'm going to up it because I can't really, so I'm going to go for a 9 out of 10 as well.
Wow.
I wrote down 8, and I think actually no, it deserves a 9. So yeah, Fargo. Wow, that's a highly rated movie for us.
That is indeed.
I think in doing this podcast, it's opened my eyes to I think I was always very stingy before I started doing this podcast and stuff. There's no such film that gets a 10 out of 10, but the reality is,
me too,
a great film is a great film, and I think we should feel comfortable enough to say that to our listeners. So,
and guys, what do you think of Fargo? Does anyone disagree with us? I'd love to hear some thoughts of people who don't like this film, because we've just all kind of agreed on this one. It doesn't always happen, so get in touch. Email us on offradarpod@gmail.com, tweet us at offradarpodcast. Follow us on Facebook and YouTube and other social media sites in the description down below, and also give us another film to watch, maybe one that you love or maybe one that you hate, just to piss us off.
And feel free to send us a message with a Minnesotan accent, because we cannot get it right. So how you doing there?
I don't know.
Jeeze.
I don't know about that. Bloody hell.